Alright, welcome to this short video lecture on static variables. So let's finish off our discussion on static variables and static members. So we discussed this array class. So first of all, we discussed that if we need to keep account of the number of objects or number of instances that are created of that particular object, so for that we can have the static member. So in that case, we initially discussed that we can access it without even creating one object. So it turns out that static variables and methods are basically class level members. So you have to access these using the class name and then the scope resolution instead of the dot operator. So secondly, so for this POC, proof of concept, we have kept this private, but again, it's not a good practice to have variables as public. So if we want this to be private, so let's just shift this to the private section. I'll recap this static pi again, but let's first recap this. Static int count, so now it's private. So the other thing that we need to discuss is the static variables. If they're not constant, they cannot be initialized while declaring, so they have to be initialized in the CPP file like this. The scope resolution comes before the variable name and then the variable. No need to write static again. And then this is how we initialize static variables in the CPP file. So now we have static count. So we need, the purpose of this is to keep track of the count of the number of objects that are being created. So, and whenever an object is created, the constructor is called. So basically we need to do a count plus plus in all the constructors. So let's go to the CPP file and find out the constructors, and let's add a count plus plus over there. Alright, so this is a destructor. We'll come to this. So this is a constructor, copy constructor. Let's just do a count plus plus here, which means if the driver file has an object created using the copy constructor, so we should have a count plus plus here also. Similarly, this is a parameterized constructor. We should have a count plus plus here also. In all the constructors we have to write this, because the driver file can have any constructor being called through an object. So we have to make sure all constructors have this count plus plus, otherwise our count might become inconsistent. So we have to make sure you have all constructors having this count plus plus, otherwise the purpose will not be fulfilled if you miss any constructor. Similarly, when an object is destroyed, so in the destructor we need to do a count minus minus. So let's do a count minus minus. Let's test our code. Let's create our various objects. Let's say array A. So this is to the default constructor. Let's do another object using the default the copy constructor. Let's create another object. Let's keep this inside some if log. Let's say if true, and so this is just a POC. So if true means obviously this will be true. This will go inside the block. So we are just testing the concept. So it might not be a very meaningful code. So let's use some parameterized constructor. So let's use which one? Let's use this parameterized constructor, which sends an integer. Let's say 5. I think that's it. So let's check this count at every point. Let's say after these two, the count should be 2 because we have 2 objects created, and after this third one the count should be 3, and then let's check the count again here. Alright, so we need to check the count here, but the problem is that now we have, this code was written when count was private, sorry, public. Now count is private, so we need setters and getters. So this calls for another discussion on something called static functions. So we need a getter for that for now. We don't need a setter for now. So let's say get count. So getters have a return type, and so that's it. But this function is like the normal functions we write for classes, which are non-static. So we need to make this function static, so we add the static keyword. So static and get count. So we need to define this. We have declared it. We need to define this here. So that's it. No need to write static again. Then the array scope resolution get count, and its definition will simply return the count. All right. So this is a getter, but the difference is this is a getter for a static method, static attribute. So now we have to change this to get count. Note that since this is a static method, so we won't be using a dot operator. We'll be using this. This function is also class level. So this static method is also class level. So we'll access it using the class name. So this is get count over here. Alright, so now let's compile and run this code. Alright, so let's see. Alright, so let's do an end line in the constructor messages, or just let's comment them because we now don't need to test this. This is another POC. So these were initially added earlier on in previous examples. Let's just remove these so that we can focus on our static variable proof of concept. So we have removed that. So let's compile this again, and again we have to write n line over here. All right. Two, 3, and 2. Interesting output. Let's see. All right. So this line number 8 is giving us the output 2, which is right because we have two objects A and B. Let's see. Line number 11 has a cout which says 3. That's also right, since C is third or 3 objects are created. Third one A, B, C. That makes us 3. The count is 3. But line number 13 gives us a strange output. It gives us 2, not 3. So do think about this and let me know what is the reason. Alright, so think about this, that why this has become 2. Alright, so alright, so this was about the static variables and static methods. And similarly, talk about this constant. So we just talked about that. What if we have a constant in our class, and if it's not static, let's say this is the case. So in this case, every object that will be created will have a copy of this constant 3.142. This will occupy 4 bytes of memory in every object. So, and this is a constant, this will not change. So there is no harm, although it's not a meaningful constant. This is just an array. Let's say we can have, in the case of array, we can have, let's say, a max size. Max size equals to, let's say, max size is 1000. We don't allow an array of more than 1000. Let's say. In this case, this constant, if we don't make it in this case, if it's it's not if it's a non-static member like other members like ARR and size, every object will have a copy of this. Every object will have 4 bytes occupied by this variable, this constant in fact. So in order to avoid this, just to ensure there is one copy made, so we can declare this as a static constant. So generally constants are, it's a good practice to keep constants as static so that only one copy is actually made. So this is another reason for static members. One is for constants, another is to keep a track of the count of the objects and so on. So this is it. Another use of static methods, irrespective of, like, it's not related to the getters and setters only, but let's say we have any function that does not actually use any of these any of the member attributes, and which is just a sort of a helper function or a utility function which is doing some, let's say, validation or which does not use any internal attributes. So in that case we can have that method also as static. So we can have static methods. So any method, let's say foo. So this method we can keep it as public and static, but these methods should be such that they do not use the attributes of this array, because static methods are class level, and class level methods cannot access object level attributes. So you need to note this concept down, that static methods cannot access non-static methods or attributes. On the contrary, non-static methods like these array and all, constructors, destructors, these non-static methods can access static methods and attributes, and that we have seen here also, because constructor is a non-static method. It's a normal method that we have discussed so far. It is accessing a static variable count. So this is perfectly fine. We have compiled this code. So this you need to note, note down that non-static methods can use static methods and static variables attributes, but static methods cannot access the non-static attributes or methods. And in fact, it does not make sense, because static means it's class level, and for static there's no need to even create one object. So even if we don't have any object, we can still call static methods and we can still use static attributes. So if we don't have any object, so obviously we cannot access any. If an object is not created, then that non-static attribute is also not created. So it does not make sense also. So that's all from my side. So that completes our discussion on static members. So we'll continue from friend function in the next class. See you guys in the next class. Goodbye.